At my wife's retirement party. Surrounded by colleagues she'd spent 30 years teaching alongside. My 15-year-old granddaughter grabbed my sleeve and pulled me toward the hallway. Her face was the color of the white tablecloths. "Grandpa," she whispered, "I need you to come with me right now. Please, don't ask questions yet." I thought she was feeling sick. Maybe the heat from the banquet room. Maybe too much punch. Diane had been planning this party for months, and I wasn't about to let anything interrupt it. But then I saw her hands, both of them shaking the way a person shakes when they've seen something they can't unsee. I followed her. "I'm so glad you're here with me tonight. What I'm about to tell you happened on a Friday evening in Savannah, Georgia. Before I go any further, tell me where you are right now. What time is it? Drop it in the comments below. I want to know who's listening as I take you back to that hallway." My wife Diane turned 62 that spring and had just wrapped up her final semester teaching 3rd grade at Forsyth Elementary. 30 years of other people's children learning to read, to add, to be kind to one another. She deserved every decoration in that banquet room at the old pink house. Her colleagues had strung gold and silver streamers from the ceiling. Her students, past and present, had sent cards that covered an entire table. Her best friend Carol had driven 4 hours from Macon just to be there. Diane was luminous that night. Pale blue dress. The pearl earrings I gave her on our 25th anniversary. Laughing in the center of a circle of women who had spent decades in classrooms beside her. At 62, she had more energy than most people I knew half her age. Our daughter, Renee, stood near the drink table with her husband, Derek, both of them smiling with their mouths, only I'd noticed it the moment they walked in. Renee kept touching her purse, a large canvas bag she'd set on a chair beside her. Derek kept checking his phone with the careful casualness of someone pretending not to check his phone. I hadn't said anything. 35 years of being Renee's father told me something was off. I just didn't know how off. "Grandpa." Sophie appeared at my elbow. My granddaughter, Renee and Derek's daughter, 15 years old and usually impossible to rattle. She was rattled. "Honey, it's your grandmother's party. Whatever it is. Can it wait until after the toasts?" She looked at me the way you look at someone when you need them to understand something without saying it out loud. Her jaw was tight. "No, it really cannot." We slipped out of the banquet room into the narrow hallway that ran toward the back of the restaurant. The sounds of the party faded behind us. Sophie pulled me past the coat rack and into the small alcove near the emergency exit. And then she turned and faced me, and I could see she had been crying recently. Not now, but recently, the kind of crying that leaves a faint trace around the eyes. "I need to show you something," she said. "But first I need you to know that I love my mom and dad. I need you to know I understand what I'm doing right now." I put both hands on her shoulders. "Sophie, talk to me." She pulled out her phone. Her thumb hovered over a voice memo. "Grandpa, 2 nights ago, I came home early from Claire's house. The front door was open a crack and I could hear them in the kitchen. I stopped because I heard Grandma's name. She looked up at me. I recorded it. I didn't know what else to do. I just knew I had to do something. My throat had gone dry. Show me." She pressed play. The audio was close. Intimate. The kind of recording made by a teenager standing frozen in a hallway, afraid to breathe. The voices were unmistakable. "Renee first. The account transfers need to happen before the end of the month. Once the power of attorney is active, she won't be able to contest them." Derek's voice. Lower. More careful. "What about the house? You said she'd sign it over willingly. She thinks it's a trust. For us? She doesn't understand what a revocable transfer means. Dad never explained finances to her. She just signs what we put in front of her." Pause. "The annuity alone is $400,000. Plus the house, plus whatever's in the joint account. What about your father? He's not on the annuity. That was her money before they married. And once she's at Magnolia Trace, he won't have standing to challenge anything." "Doctor, Harmon's evaluation tonight should do it. Mild cognitive impairment. Early onset. Enough to justify the transfer of financial control. Sophie made a small sound beside me. I hadn't realized I'd stopped breathing. She's not impaired. Derek's voice. She won't be when Harmon sees her. That's why I brought the capsules. 15 milligrams in her drink during the first toast. She'll be foggy. Disoriented. Difficulty answering questions. Harmon's seen her twice. He knows what to look for. And tonight he'll find it. Renee's voice was flat. Businesslike. The voice of someone reading from a list. By Monday, she'll be at Magnolia Trace. By the end of the month, we have control of everything. A silence. Then Derek. Quiet. Are you sure this is the only way? We're 2 payments from losing the house. My house. I'm not losing it because my mother wants to travel and take watercolor classes with her retirement money. The recording ended. I stood in that alcove with my back against the wall and my daughter's voice still hanging in the air between Sophie and me like smoke. She had been planning this. My own daughter. Not for days. For months. Since Diane announced her retirement. Since the annuity payout became real. Since the house appraised at $640,000. Renee had looked at her mother's entire life and seen an asset to liquidate. Grandpa. Sophie's voice broke. I'm sorry. She's my mom. I know. I pulled her into a hug for exactly 3 seconds because that was all we had. I know she is. And you did the right thing. You did the only thing. What do we do? I already had my phone out. I dialed 911 with hands steadier than I expected. When the operator answered, I gave her the address. My name, and 3 sentences. My daughter and son-in-law planned to drug my wife tonight at this restaurant in order to have her declared cognitively impaired. A physician named Dr. Harmon was present to provide a falsified evaluation. And my granddaughter had a recording of the conspiracy. Officers are en route. 15 minutes. Is your wife currently safe? Through the small window set into the hallway door, I could see the banquet room. Diane standing at the front, accepting a framed photograph from her principal. Renee moving toward the drink table. Derek's hand on the canvas bag. She's inside. They have the substance. They're about to move. Sir, do not confront them directly. Officers, will I hung up? Sophie stared at me. The police said, 15 minutes is too long. I push the door open. We go back in. We stay beside her. We act like nothing has changed. Can you do that? She wiped her eyes fast with the back of her hand. Yes. Walking back into that party was the longest walk of my life. The room was warm, bright, full of people who loved my wife. And somewhere near the drink table was my daughter, with a capsule meant to turn Diane into someone who needed to be managed. I crossed the room in 12 steps and put my hand on Diane's arm. She turned and smiled. That full smile that has meant home to me for 36 years. There he is. She squeezed my hand. Carol was just telling me about her new grandbaby. Carol beamed. 7 pounds. 4 ounces. Started talking about sleep schedules, and I almost came up for air. I kept my eyes moving. Renee was at the drink table now, her back to us, doing something with the champagne glasses. Derek standing beside her, blocking the angle. Sophie had drifted to the edge of the table, close enough to watch. I put myself between Diane and the drink table. Renee turned with 2 champagne glasses and her best version of a devoted daughter smile. Mom. I wanted to be the one to do the first toast. She held 1 glass out toward Diane. Oh. Honey. Diane reached for it. Sophie stepped forward. Grandma. Wait. I've been trying to find you for 20 minutes. I have something to show you on my phone. It'll just take a second. Renee's smile tightened. Sophie. Not now. Mom asked me to find that video from the 5th grade recital. Sophie held the phone out toward Diane with both hands, physically stepping between her grandmother and the glass. You said you wanted to see it again before the toasts. I looked at my daughter. She was looking at Sophie. Something moved across her face that I had never seen there before, and I hope never to see again. I'll get fresh glasses, I said, taking both from Renee before she could react. Let me find a server. I walked directly to the tall young man in the black vest near the kitchen door, and I said to him quietly, I need you to take these glasses to the back. Do not let anyone drink from them. And I need you to point me toward whoever is in charge of security tonight. He blinked. Is everything? Please. Right now. He took the glasses and I turned to scan the room. Near the entrance, a woman in a dark green dress was watching the room with a stillness that had nothing to do with enjoying a party. By the far wall, a man in slacks and a collared shirt held a glass of water he hadn't touched. Plain clothes. They'd made it inside. The woman caught my eye for half a second. A small nod. Renee appeared at my shoulder. Dad. Where did you go? She kept her voice low and pleasant. You okay? I'm fine. She put her hand on my arm. Listen. There's something we need to talk about. About Mom. I've been worried for a while now. Some things I've noticed. Her eyes were reading my face for information. I asked Dr. Harmon to come tonight. He's over there, near the windows. I thought it might be good to have him do a casual check-in. Nothing formal. I looked across the room. Dr. Harmon, Diane's physician for 11 years, stood near the windows with a drink in his hand, and that same professional smile he wore in his office. A man I had trusted. A man we had trusted. Renee. I said, keeping my voice even. Diane doesn't need a check-in tonight. This is her party. I know. She squeezed my arm. But better to catch things early. Right, it's not a big deal. Just a few questions. I've been documenting some concerns. The forgetfulness. Getting confused about appointments. Diane plans her garden 2 seasons ahead. She finished a 900-page novel last month and emailed me 3 paragraphs of analysis. She hasn't forgotten an appointment in 36 years of marriage. She's been hiding it well. Renee's voice dropped lower. Dad. I love her. I'm trying to help. You're not as young as you used to be either. This could be a lot for you to handle alone. Magnolia Trace is a beautiful facility. I've toured it. She'd have her own room. Activities. Care, you've already chosen a facility. I said it too loudly. Several people nearby turned. Renee's smile stayed in place through effort I could actually see. I'm just being practical. Planning ahead. Sophie appeared at my other side. Quiet as a shadow. She touched my hand once. I looked past Renee toward the windows. Dr. Harmon was moving through the room now, angling toward the table where Diane sat with Carol. I excused myself in the middle of Renee's next sentence. I reached Diane's table in 8 steps and sat down in the empty chair beside her. Carol looked up, smiled. Doctor? Harmon arrived 2 seconds later. Diane. He extended his hand. Wonderful party. You look fantastic. Ken? She shook his hand warmly. I didn't know you were coming. Renee mentioned the celebration. I couldn't stay away. He set his medical bag on the floor with the casual ease of a man who does it all the time. These big events can be overstimulating. I always check in with my patients when I can. Just a few quick questions. How's your sleep been? Any confusion lately? Trouble with names? Diane laughed. Ken, I'm at my retirement party. If I can't remember the names of people I've worked with for 30 years, I deserve to be evaluated. Completely routine. He was already reaching into his bag. I just want to. That's enough. I put my hand flat on the table. Ken, this isn't routine, and we all know it. His hand stopped. His professional smile flickered. Diane looked at me. Walter, what is going on? I took her hand. Sweetheart, I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear all of it before you respond. She went still. Diane has always been able to read a room faster than anyone I know. She read mine in about 2 seconds. Her spine straightened. Tell me. I told her. Not everything. Not there. But the outline of it, the recording, the capsules in the champagne. Doctor, Harmon's purpose tonight. Magnolia Tres. I watched her face move through shock. And then, something harder. Not collapse. Resolution. She looked at Dr. Armand. Her voice was very quiet. Ken, is this true? He said nothing. She looked at the medical bag on the floor and then back at him. You've been my doctor for 11 years. Silence. The woman in the green dress was moving toward us now. Unhurried. Henahesel. The man by the wall was already beside Derek. I heard Renee say something sharp and then stop. Detective Maria Santos. The woman placed her badge on the table in front of Dr. Armand. Sir. I need you to step away from the table. He stood immediately. Too fast. Knocking his chair back. Across the room, Sophie stood very still watching her parents be approached by two officers. She was 15 years old and she had the expression of someone twice that age. Within 4 minutes, the banquet room had the particular quality of air that exists after something irreversible has happened. The jazz quartet had stopped playing. Diane's colleagues stood in small clusters. Not leaving. Not speaking. Carol had her arm around Diane's shoulders. Officers had found the capsules in Renee's purse during a brief and very quiet exchange near the coat rack. 3 capsules in an unmarked prescription bottle. The lab would confirm the contents within 48 hours. Derek was walked out first. He went without resistance, looking at the floor. Renee stopped at the doorway and looked back across the room at Sophie. Sophie met her eyes and didn't look away. I watched my daughter leave. The daughter I had driven to soccer practice and taught to parallel park and walk down the aisle on her wedding day. The daughter who had sat at my kitchen table 6 months ago and told me she was worried about her mother's memory. And I had thought she was being caring. And she had been building a case. Detective Santos sat across from Diane and me at a table near the window. She was thorough and unhurried. Diane answered every question clearly. Precisely. With the composure of a woman who has managed 30 classrooms of 8-year-olds and is not going to be undone by paperwork. Sophie sat beside me. She had stopped shaking. Santos laid a folder on the table. Your daughter and son-in-law weren't operating independently? She opened it. A man named Gerald Cost runs a consulting service out of Atlanta. He calls it Family Transition Partners. She slid a business card across the table. Glossu. Professional. Blue fond. What it actually does is provide adult children with the complete framework to obtain legal and financial control over elderly parents. Diane leaned forward. How many families? Santos looked at her steadily. In Georgia. 11 confirmed cases. We believe there are more in South Carolina and Tennessee. Doctor. Harmon provided falsified cognitive evaluations in at least 6 of them. He's done this before. I said, yes. She closed the folder. Mr. and Mrs. Calloway. The recording your granddaughter made is the clearest evidence we've obtained against this network. Every other case involved the elderly parent having no idea until they woke up in a facility. She paused. Sophie, what you did required a great deal of courage. I want you to know that... Sophie looked at her hands. She's my grandma. Santos nodded. I know. We gave statements until nearly midnight. When we finally walked out of the old pink house into the warm savannah night, Sophie walked between Diane and me. I put my arm around her. She was quiet for a long time. What happens to me now? She finally asked. With Mom and Dad gone, you come home with us, Diane said. For as long as you need. She reached across and tucked Sophie's hair behind her ear the way she had done since Sophie was 4 years old. Sophie leaned into her and didn't say anything else. The weeks that followed dismantled things that took years to build and revealed things I hadn't known existed. Renee had opened a line of credit using Diane's information without her knowledge. 6 months earlier, Derek had researched Magnolia Trace in December. They had contacted Gerald Cost in January. 3 weeks after Diane announced her retirement date, Jennifer Marsh, the attorney Santos connected us with, spread the documentation across our dining room table. One Tuesday morning. Financial fraude. Elder abuse. Conspiracy. Forgery. She was thorough and calm and angry in the way good attorneys are angry. Quietly and usefully. She also told us about the other families. Norma Paxton was 74 years old and had been at Magnolia Trace for 7 months. Her son had brought her in on a Tuesday in November. Told her it was a temporary stay while her apartment was being renovated. The renovation never happened. Her apartment had been sold. Norma had a PhD in biochemistry and had run a research lab at Georgia State for 22 years. She was doing crossword puzzles in the common room when we visited in pen, the Friday edition. She looked up when we came in and studied our faces with the precision of someone accustomed to analyzing data. "You're here about Gerald Cost," she said. "We are," Diane said. Norma set down her pen. "I've been documenting everything since January." She pulled a thick spiral notebook from beside her chair. Dates. Names. Policy violations. Conversation. "They call me difficult." She said it with something close to satisfaction. "I prefer persistent." Sophie sat across from her and asked careful questions for 40 minutes. She had brought her own notebook. Raymond Okafor was 70 years old and had been at Sunrise Gardens in Augusta for 5 months. Retired civil engineer. His daughter had obtained emergency guardianship after a medical procedure during which Raymond had been sedated, and she had had him sign transfer documents while he was still coming out of anesthesia. Raymond's hands shook now, a side effect of a medication he had been put on at the facility against his wishes. Before that, he told us, he had been building a greenhouse in his backyard. "I just want to go home," he said. "My tomatoes are still out there. I don't know who's been watering them." Sophie wrote this down. Back at our house that evening, she sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open and a legal pad beside it. Building a spreadsheet, color-coded. Every name, every facility, every date of admission, every attorney of record. She updated it every night. She was 15 years old. She went to school every morning and came home and worked on the spreadsheet. She saw her therapist on Wednesdays. Some weeks were harder than others. Renee had sent 2 letters. Sophie had read the first one, and then asked me to hold on to the rest until she decided whether she wanted them. I kept them in the desk drawer in my study. Derek wrote once. She didn't open it. Detective Santos called 4 months after the party. Trial date is confirmed. March 9th. Gerald Cost. Renee Calloway. Derek Calloway. And Dr. Kenneth Harmon are being tried together. Federal elder abuse, conspiracy charges, plus state fraud, forgery, and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. She paused. "Mr. Calloway, your family has been extraordinary through this. I want you to know that this case is going to open a great many doors that have been sealed for a long time. Jennifer Marsh prepared us for the trial, over 6 sessions at her office. Sophie was our key witness. She sat across from Jennifer and gave her testimony in a voice that was steady and precise and only broke once, near the end. When Jennifer asked her to describe what she had felt standing in that hallway listening to the recording play back, Sophie was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I kept thinking, somebody has to do something. And then I realized the somebody was me." The courtroom on March 9th was full. 11 families. Former colleagues of Diane's, a reporter from the Savannah Morning News, 3 attorneys from the Georgia Elder Law Task Force who had been working parallel cases for 2 years and now had the evidence they needed. Judge Carolyn Whitfield was 68 years old, silver-haired, and conducted her courtroom with the particular authority of someone who has seen enough and is done being patient about it. Gerald Cost stood first for sentencing. "You built a business model on the systematic exploitation of elderly citizens and the corruption of medical and legal professionals to execute it. 22 years in federal prison. You will be 80 years old upon release." The age of several of your victims when you targeted them. Koss stared straight ahead. Dr. Kenneth Harmon. You falsified medical evaluations to support illegal guardianship proceedings in at least 8 cases. Your medical license is permanently revoked. 10 years. Eligible for parole. After 7. Harmon looked at the floor. Derek Calloway. You participated in the financial planning and execution of this conspiracy. 14 years. Eligible for parole. After 9. Derek did not look at Sophie. Renee Calloway. Judge Whitfield paused. The record shows you initiated contact with Gerald Cost, conducted months of premeditated planning, obtained fraudulent documents, and introduced a controlled substance into an event designed to celebrate your mother's 30 years of service to this community's children. You asked your own 15-year-old daughter to help you document your mother's behavior without telling her why. She let that sit for a moment. 18 years. Eligible for parole. After 12. Renee turned and looked at Sophie. Sophie looked back. Neither of them moved. Judge Whitfield asked if anyone wished to address the court. Norma Paxton stood first, and she was magnificent. 7 months, she said. 7 months I watched the parking lot from my window every day waiting for my son to come and tell me there had been a mistake. I have a doctorate. I ran a laboratory. I taught for 2 decades. The mistake was trusting that love is unconditional. Raymond Okafor spoke about his greenhouse and the tomatoes he had not been there to harvest, and the months of medication he had not consented to, and the 212 days he had spent waiting for someone to see him as a person, rather than an asset. Then Diane stood. She spoke for 4 minutes without notes. This network operated because it understood one thing about our society. We have decided that aging is a kind of diminishment, that a 62-year-old woman with 30 years of expertise and a sharp mind and a full life ahead of her could plausibly be described as impaired. And that description would be accepted. That is the vulnerability these people exploited. Not our minds, but our culture's willingness to believe the worst about what it means to grow older. What nearly happened to me is happening to other people right now in facilities in this state and in every state. It will keep happening until we decide that old is not a synonym for powerless. The courtroom was very quiet. She sat down and reached for my hand and then reached for Sophie's. When the bailiffs led the defendants out, Renee paused near the door. She looked at Sophie for a long moment. I couldn't read what was in her face. Sophie held her gaze until Renee looked away. Sophie exhaled. 7 months after that retirement party, I sat in the front room of what Diane had started calling the project office. A second bedroom. We'd converted into workspace. Bookshelves full of case files. A corkboard covered in notes. Sophie's spreadsheet printed and color-coded on the wall. Sophie came in after school and dropped her backpack by the door and sat at the desk and opened her laptop without being asked. We'd gotten Norma out of Magnolia Trace in February. She was living in a senior community of her own choosing in Decatur, 12 minutes from a daughter who now called every Sunday because the alternative was consequences. Norma's attorney had made very clear Raymond Okafor was home. His tomatoes were gone, but he had replanted in March, and he had sent us a photograph of the first green shoots. 4 cases were still moving through the courts. Jennifer Marsh had taken 2 of them pro bono. The Georgia Elder Law Task Force had used our documentation to push through a legislative proposal requiring independent verification before emergency guardianship could be granted. It was in committee. It would probably take 2 years. Diane was tracking it every week and had already testified once before a subcommittee. Sophie looked up from her laptop. Grandpa, there's a woman in Macon. Her son had her committed 6 weeks ago. Her neighbor just found our contact information. I looked at her across the desk. This 15-year-old girl who had stood in a hallway with a shaking phone and chosen the right thing when the right thing cost her everything. Call her, I said. She was already dialing. I want to tell you something before I finish. I spent 38 years as a high school history teacher. I know how to read a timeline. And when I look back at the timeline of what almost happened to Diane, what I see is a series of ordinary moments that didn't look like anything at the time. Papers to sign. A doctor's appointment. A casual comment about memory. An invitation to tour a facility. Just to look. No commitment. None of it looked like a crime. All of it was, if your family has started asking about your finances, talking about your memory, suggesting a facility, bringing new documents to sign. Pay attention. Not because your family doesn't love you. Most families do. But love and greed are not mutually exclusive. And the people who built careers on exploiting that fact understood something we have been slow to accept. Protect yourself. Talk to an attorney before you sign anything. Know what power of attorney actually means. Tell someone you trust about every document, every assessment, every suggestion. And if you're a young person watching this, and someone in your family is being treated as less than they are, remember what Sophie remembered in that hallway. Somebody has to do something. And sometimes, that somebody is you. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to MT, Sweet Revenge, and leave me a comment telling me where you're watching from tonight. Because knowing you're out there matters more than you know.